Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today's video is going to be a bit unusual, and it was definitely not planned because this situation happened to me and was quite a surprise. So I'm just going to get straight into what happened. So I have two different stories. By the Light of the Moon is a book that I've been working on since last year. And I started it. It's an action thriller, so it's very different than the genres I normally write, and I tried to improvise. That didn't work, so I started trying to outline it, and I got so far and then I got stuck. And I couldn't figure things out. This isn't my husband's normal genre, so he's the one that normally I bounce ideas off of, and even he was stuck. So I basically stopped writing in it. I think I started it actually sometime last year, but I stopped writing in it on January 6th, and I just kind of left it alone and never went back to it. So I got inspiration, and I was like, I've been too much in the modern world, so I started writing another fantasy book. Started writing a fantasy book called Shadowfall, and I got really into it. Same thing, I wrote it out, and I got so far in it, which I think I got to 48,000 words in it, and then I got stuck. And I was like, well, I guess I'm done with this book now, because I'd written a lot in it, but it still wasn't complete just because I had fun writing what I did in it. So the other day, I've been watching a lot of YouTubers, and some of the YouTubers that I watch have been talking about this new program called, ChatGPT. And I wondered what all the interest was in it, and it's an AI that you can chat with in open dialogue. So it's similar to all the other AIs you guys have probably heard about, but it's different in the sense that it'll give you answers to whatever you ask. So I've seen YouTubers use it for Star Wars fan fictions. I've seen it people use it to give them good titles for YouTube videos and so on and so forth. And so I was like, well, I want to test this thing, because if YouTubers are using it to give them titles for their YouTube videos and to help them inspire them for YouTube scripts and stuff like that, then why couldn't I use it for writing? And so I wanted to test to see how good this thing was. And so the first thing that I did was, as you can see here, I was like, I'm going to test it. I might as well use the premise for By the Light of the Moon just to see how good it is. Maybe it can give me a decent outline, basically kind of as a starting point. And again, I want to emphasize before we get into any of this, I know that there are definitely controversial opinions about AI in general. I don't know how most authors feel about it. And some people on one side feel like, it's with AI art, it's against the artists because they're hard work. I've seen authors feel like if you use an AI as a writer, you're lazy and all that stuff. So that's one side of the argument. And so my opinion on this particular AI and this is for AI with obviously the dialogue and the writing and stuff like that. My personal opinion is that this is a great way to get inspiration. As authors, we get inspiration from everywhere. Even the authors who say that even the authors that prefer not to get outside help from anything and they want to come up with everything on their own, they're still pulling inspiration from somewhere, whether it's a book that they've read, whether it's a TV show or a movie that they've watched or a video game that they've played, or maybe they've walked down the street and they saw something happen, or they saw a scenery that they liked and they included that in their book. Whether they've pulled inspiration from their own personality in their own life, your inspiration has to come from somewhere. And so for somebody like me, one, I stay home a lot, so I don't go out, so I don't have that outside inspiration. Number two, I don't read a whole lot. I write the stories that I want to read, so I read a lot of my own books, and so I pull inspiration from video games, from movies, from TV shows. But sometimes I still get stuck. I'm not watching anything new right now, so there's no new inspiration coming in. And so that's where this AI, ChatGPT, can come in and really just give you a source of inspiration. It's like if you're building a house, right? You are the architect, you're the designer, the house is your design, but the bricks have to come from somewhere. And so you're going to get the bricks, but once you have the bricks, it's up to you what you do with them. You put them in a certain order, you arrange them in a certain order to build the foundation, and from there you can design the house. And the house itself is still yours, even though you bought the bricks or got them from somewhere else. To me, that's what this Chat GPT is it's the source of the bricks. Once the bricks are given to me as the author, it's up to me to do with them what I will, and the story that comes out is still mine. So I'm not being lazy and I'm not cheating or anything along those lines. It's just a source of inspiration. So with all of that out of the way, let's get into this. All right, so the first thing that I said was write a detailed story outline for a modern day action thriller book about a man who is kidnapped by the mob and fights to survive and get back to his family alive. That's the premise of By the Light of the Moon. So it was pretty simple log line. I wanted to see, with this thing, I wasn't actually looking for it to give me an outline that I could use to write my book. I just wanted to see how detailed their outlines were going to be, and if you could use their outlines as kind of a starting point, and then you fill in all the details, because I prefer a chapter by chapter outline. And so it wasn't going to work for me anyway, but I wanted to see how detailed it was. So first of all, they named it Jack. My character's not named Jack, so that threw me off. But it gave like part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, titled them, and then gave 3 points for each thing. So it was like establish his background, lead up to his kidnapping, show him being taken where he's held captive, introduce the mob boss. So one of the things that I didn't think about, and that's where this chat comes in at, is in my book, I didn't think, oh, let's have them, the bad guys, take him to a location and hold him captive for a short time. For some reason, that plot thread never popped into my head. So that right there gave me some ideas. I was like, I could have a couple of chapters of him being captive. I didn't think about that. I also didn't think about the mob boss or who these people were. I knew I had to build them, but I didn't have any ideas for it. So this kind of focused a little bit too much on the prison and fighting back inside there and all that stuff. So I asked it again. This time I got more, I was like, maybe I wasn't specific enough about my story because it didn't feel like it was helping me with By the Light of the Moon. So I was like, write a detailed story outline for a modern day action thriller book, same thing, about a countryman who works as an FBI special agent. Because again, the Jack character, not at all what I was wanting for the premise, so I was trying to give it more specific details this time. So instead of just a man, he's a countryman who works as an FBI special agent who's kidnapped by the bomb boss and fights to survive, escape, and get back to his family alive with lots of action and suspense. So I added in this one because I wanted not about his survival in a sort of prison, but about the escape and all that and the action at that point. So this time it gave me the introduction. So it actually keeps the same structure where the introductions where you introduce their life or whatever. It did give me more details about his background as a hunter and outdoorsman and has a connection with the land. So that was like, ooh, I can bring that into the story a lot more. Same thing where it leads into his kidnapped. Same thing where he's held captive. So it kept those pretty much the same, just a few more details about the character. So this time it changed it. Instead of about the prison, this became about survival. So show his survival skills, his escape and encounters with Vito and his henchmen, introduce a fellow captive who becomes an ally. So I was like, okay, so we can actually have him escape and get into a wilderness where he has to use his survival skills to stay alive. That's a good premise for some chapters in the middle of the book. And then describing his escape so he would encounter the henchmen along the way. So then it had where Clay, in this one, it had the main character and this new character team up to fight their empire and bring down the organization. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want them to fight back so much as I want it to be about his escape and getting back to his family and safety, not about fighting against the mob and taking the fight to the mob, so to speak. So I was like, give me some scene ideas for an action book where a man is kidnapped by the mob. What does the mob do to him when he's kidnapped? What are some scene ideas I could write as he escapes and fight for his survival? This is exactly where I'm stuck in By the Light of the Moon. I led up to his kidnapping, and that's in the outline, and now I'm stuck as to what to do with him now that he's kidnapped. What do they do with him? What do they want with him? For some reason, I was just blank, and I realized that the fault lies with me because I didn't build the mob. So if I don't know the mob, I don't know what they want from him. If I don't know what they want from him, I don't know what they're doing to him, and I can't build the escape because I don't know where they are. You have to know what they want with him in order to figure out where would they take him, what are they doing to him, and therefore how can he escape. And so me having to ask the AI questions made me realize, well, what questions do I even need to be asking? So basically it gave me 10 ideas, and I picked one of them that I liked, which was how to make hiding out and fighting for survival chapters last longer. And I was curious as to whether the AI could take the ideas that it's given me, these 7 ideas here, and actually expand upon those ideas. Because I really liked number 5, the hideout scene, because earlier it mentioned the survival outside and using his survival skills. So I was like, so hiding out from the enemy and living off the land could be that, but I was like, I still don't know what specifically to do in there. So that's where I was like, can you give me some ideas to span it out? So it gave advice as well as suggestions, and this is what I like here, because if you are in new territory, whether you're a new author and you don't know what you're doing, whether you're writing in a new genre like me and you don't know what you're doing, you can Google things and research all day long, but this is so much faster, and it can streamline the process for you and make it specific to what you want. Because if you Google stuff, you can't just Google a question about the ideas in your head. You can Google how to do things and maybe read blog articles about it, but you can't get specific to get your help unless you have somebody in your life you can talk to. But if you don't, or if that person doesn't have any ideas, what are you supposed to do? So this is where the AI chat really can come in handy if you're stuck in a book, and especially if you don't know what you're doing. You can ask it, can you get details about, what are some scene ideas I could do here? How should I go about writing this? And it gave me suggestions. So adding more obstacles, develop secondary characters, increase the stakes, show his resourcefulness, and build tension. Those are the tips it's giving me on how to add these survival chapters. And then it gave me suggestions. This could include harsh weather conditions, dangerous wildlife, other threats. So in each one, to raise tensions, you can increase the stakes. For example, you can add time constraints such as a deadline for when he has to get home. This could include scenes, this could include moments. So it gave me tips like, these are the things you should do in order to lengthen out this part of the book, and then these are some suggestions on how to do it. So then I was like, okay, well, this isn't enough to give me 50,000 words, which it's good, but we're getting there. I want a subplot with the mob coming after his wife and children. So I was like, give me ideas for a subplot in this book that adds the mob coming after his wife and children. So the one thing that I didn't know was whether the AI was going to keep track of our conversation and whether it knew that we were still talking about the same book or not, or if it would give me ideas for a brand new book. So I added in for a subplot in this book to make sure that it knew we were still to see if it could keep track of the conversation and know that we're still talking about the same book. And it did, because it said show the protagonist family. So it knew we were still in the same book, basically, and I liked that. So it gave me a few ideas as before, 7 ideas, and I picked one and give me some ideas to do with the family on the run. So then it gave me some specific scene ideas as it did above with the man. And then I was like, give me some scene ideas to show the protagonist running from the mob and trying to get back to his family. Because again, I asked it for help with survival scenes. Now I wanted a few ideas for what I could do for him on the run. So then it gave me more ideas for that. And then I was like, okay, now I need to see if it can help me develop the mob a little bit. And I want to preface all of this by saying I may or may not use any or all of these ideas. This is just a starting point for inspiration. So I had nothing. I had no ideas in my head, and we've all been there where you have nothing, no inspiration, whether you use Pinterest or other books. You're just, that you want a book about this, but you don't know what should go in the book. And you've got to figure that out from somewhere, and the inspiration has to come from somewhere. And so this is just a starting point. Well, maybe, for instance, going underground. This isn't one that I liked, but, for instance, he goes to the place to place, changes his appearance, other measures to stay hidden. So then I could develop scene ideas and chapter ideas based on this premise that he's hiding, he's underground. I could do a scene where he gets a hotel room and he buys hair dye and he's changing his hair and he's shaving his face and he's blending in with society. I could develop scene ideas based on these premises that the AI is giving me. So Then I was like, maybe it can help give me ideas for who the mob is. And again, using them as inspiration because I had nothing. I had no ideas for anything. So it gave me some ideas. So, like, rival criminals, corrupt, like maybe he is been working to take them down. And I was like, well, that's an intriguing idea. Corrupt government officials, drug cartel, terrorists, secret society, conspiracy, all that stuff. And then I said a twist in the story could be that the protagonist's father runs the mob and tries to kill him when he was a child. So why would a father have tried to kill him when he was a boy? Give me 3 ideas. Because I had this idea that was inspired by one of the Assassin's Creed video games, Odyssey, if you guys have played it. But I was like, I really want the leader of this mob to be his dad. And the dad have tried to kill him as a child, but why the heck would a dad kill his own son? And so I couldn't figure out anything. And so it was like inheritance. So by killing him as a child, he ensured that the protagonist wouldn't grow up to challenge his authority. The kid knew too much, or psychological issues. The dad's just crazy. So at that point I was busy, so I was like, can I leave and come back to this conversation later? Because I knew at that point that I was re-inspired for this book. So my point in all of this is that I had no ideas. This was a brand new genre. I'd only written one action book before, and the only reason why I was able to come up with ideas for it was because it was the military. I had a conspiracy theory. They were in another country, and so I was able to have bad guys everywhere. But for some reason, the fact that we're in America, I was like, he can just go to the police, and I had nothing. I had nothing. And I still couldn't figure out who the mob was or anything because everything ends up with corrupt government officials, and I didn't want to be cliche like that. So when you're writing a new genre, or when you're writing for the first time, or you don't know what you're doing, or even if you know what you're doing but you're just stuck, this AI, by asking it questions, you can get specific to what you're looking for. As I said, you can research in Google all day long, and that can teach you a lot. You can learn a lot. But you can never ask it specific questions with your book. If you're stuck and you have a question like, well, can you give me ideas for who the mob is? You either have to ask somebody in your life or ask somebody online who's a friend, and not everybody has ideas all the time. But this AI chat can be there. It can instantly give you some suggestions, and then you can take, maybe those suggestions spark a totally different idea that's not even what was listed. I've had that happen so many times where it's just the concept of, like, for instance, the Assassin's Creed Odyssey. In the book, the dad is a really harsh Greek military leader, Spartan thing, and he's, I think, something to do with sacrificing the youngest son to a god or something, and so he ends up trying to kill the baby, and the main character, Alexios, tries to help and gets kicked off a ledge and and the dad believes that he killed him. So I liked the idea of a dad leading this mob boss who tried to kill the main guy when he was a kid, specifically trying to kill him. So I took the concept, because I think it was either an accident or he ran off the cliff after the baby, like he wasn't the main target, and I wanted my protagonist to be the main target and be old enough to remember what happened. And now the mob is coming after him because the dad recently found out he's alive, but I still couldn't figure out why. So when you get inspiration, sometimes it's just a tiny detail, sometimes it's a sliver of something, sometimes it's a concept, and you take it, tweak it, and you make it your own, and that's where we get ideas from. All ideas come from somewhere. Like Star Wars, a lot of the original Star Wars was inspired by World War II. That's where the Empire comes from. It was inspired by the Nazis. It's just inspiration comes from somewhere for everybody, for every author, every writer, everywhere. And so this AI can be a great source of inspiration if you're stuck. And it can also get you past writer's block. So this one was a genre I didn't know, and I had no ideas and suggestions. So this conversation gave me specific ideas. So moving on, my fantasy book, Shadowfall, I really liked it, and it's a fantasy romance, so I really got into it, and again, I wrote 48,000 words in it, and it really clicked with me, but it's just the beginning. I have so many different ideas, but the ideas don't necessarily connect or form a specific plot thread, and so I basically hit writer's block the other day, and I got stuck, and I was like, well, I think that's it. I think this book's going to be one of those that I leave unfinished, and I'm pretty much done with it. I've been vlogging my progress, and that's literally what I said in the vlog, was that I think I'm done with this. And it breaks my heart because I hate leaving books unfinished. I at least want it to have a beginning, middle, and end, regardless of the length. And it was just driving me nuts that I was stuck. So after this conversation with the AI and how it re-inspired me for By the Light of the Moon, which, by the way, after I had this conversation with the AI, I was able to write 1,000 words in By the Light of the Moon yesterday. And the important thing is not the word count, but the fact that I got into it. The last several times I'd written it earlier last month, I was not into it. It was an effort just to get out a couple hundred words. I was not immersed. I was not into it. I felt like the writing was terrible and stiff and just, I didn't know what I was doing. But this time I was immersed. I was into the characters, the plot, the story. I had a bunch of ideas and it just clicked with me so well, and it flowed because of the re-inspiration from this conversation. So after that, I was like, you know what, maybe it'll help me get into Shadowfall. And so my question was, it's good with modern day style stories, but is it going to be smart enough to be able to give me fantasy? So that's where this conversation comes at. So again, because it's fantasy, I had to give it so many more details, because the story is fantasy and it's complicated, and I did not know if the AI was going to be able to keep up with me. So this was another way of testing the AI's, what the AI could do, basically. So I basically just told it exactly what I was going through. I'm having writer's block, and then I told it the premise where it's about a fantasy historian who's about to gain magical powers. I left that as detailed but as vague as possible, and become a shadow walker. And she's in love with a brave male warrior whose wife and child died. He's overcoming grief by loving her and learning to live life again. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to talk to this thing like I would my husband. And I'm like, I feel like I don't have a solid plot. A few ideas I have are that the Shadow Walkers have a special gemstone that lets people copy magical abilities, but I don't know why it's important to them. There's also a civil war going on, but I need a plot and possibly even a villain. Because I knew, okay, I think I'm having writer's block because I don't have a plot, I don't have a villain. And so far the focus is on the romance because I'm trying to write a romance. But I was like, there's outside events going on, but I don't have a set plot. And I was like, maybe that's what I'm missing, or maybe I'm just missing a good villain. So I was like, can you give me a few ideas to get unstuck in the story? And this was where I was like, is it going to be able to actually give me some ideas that follows along with it, or that gets me unstuck? So the Civil War could be fought over control of the gemstones, and I knew that I didn't want that because my Civil War, I'm very picky and very specific about it, and I'm stretching it over the course of other book series too, so that's not why the Civil War is being fought. So that idea was immediately out, but it was literally a good suggestion though, and it gave ideas, like basically it gave a premise for that particular idea, even though it wouldn't work with my story. So then the historian could discover that there was a prophecy about the Shadow Walkers and everything else. I don't want to mess with that, so that one was out. But again, it gave a really good, solid suggestion. So then the last one, the villain of the story could be a powerful sorcerer who is using the Civil War as a means to gain control of the gemstones, become all powerful. So I was like, I don't like that he's using the Civil War, maybe the gemstones, but I was like, maybe the villain is a powerful sorcerer. So I was like, who could this sorcerer be? We're picking up on something here. And I was like, give me 5 ideas, just to see if it could give me 5 instead of whatever. So, a former friend, the leader of the opposing army, ancestor of the historian, a former shadow walker, and enigmatic figure. My brain stopped at former shadow walker. I could not have thought of this twist myself, you guys. So, the sorcerer could be someone who was once a shadow walker, basically used his power for evil and was like banished, and so now he wants revenge and will stop at nothing to reclaim his power. I was like, what? I'm kind of offended I didn't think of this myself. My husband didn't think of this either. I was like, that's it, I've got my villain. And immediately ideas just started pouring out of me. So I pulled up Microsoft Word and I just started writing all these ideas for this, and I was like, I'm into it. It inspired me. This right here got me unblocked. It literally just destroyed the wall that was blocking me. So then I was like, what if we could expand upon this? So I wanted to see if the AI could expand upon it. Even though I already had my other ideas, I was like, that's such a good idea, maybe it'll give me something else. So I was like, I like that he's a former Shadow Walker, was banished for the evil he did, but I also like that he's a mysterious figure. So I really liked the other one, I don't remember where it was, but that he was a mysterious figure that was known in legend. And so I was like, how in the world can he be a known Shadow Walker that was banished and a mysterious figure in legend at the same time? So I asked the AI how we could combine those two ideas. So I asked the AI how we could combine those, and it gave me some ideas. So he's a sorcerer with a hidden agenda. He's a recluse, barely seen, or he's a banished Shadow Walker turned sorcerer. So he was banished, and then over time he became a legendary figure, known only to myth and legend, but the truth could be a mystery even to those who knew him. So this gave me, and I was like, okay, it's pretty simple. He was a Shadow Walker who was banished, and because he was banished, it was like a taboo thing, and they stopped talking about it, and so then these legends formed, rumors started forming, and that's how he became in legend. So it happened a long time ago, and then the idea hit me. This is the first shade, because Shadow Walkers have a risk of turning into an evil creature called a shade if they go evil. And I was like, this was the very first shade. That's the legend. Those are the myths. I was like, oh my gosh. So again, inspiration hit me like a dam had just shattered and the whole area is going to be flooded. Like, it was amazing. And I want to preface this by saying all ideas come from God. The gift of writing, especially for me, like, and other Christian authors, comes from God. So I don't credit the AI at all. The AI brought these things up, and God gave me the ideas once I read them. It's just like getting inspiration from a movie or a book or something. Like, I'm reading the book, God's the one that gives me the ideas in my head. So I just wanted to clarify that. And now I was like, okay, well, that was the one thing I was missing, was the villain and the legend and the plot line. Like, that is what was missing. So now I'm into the story, I'm inspired for it again, but I'm still stuck on the next scene, which is that she's got to turn into a Shadow Walker, so I have to invent this ritual. And I was like, I wonder if it can help me figure this out, because I was like, I don't know exactly what to do for this turning into a Shadow Walker ritual. I basically said it. I explained what it was, and I knew that the ritual has to involve going to the location called the Shadow Falls and a magical orb. So I was like, the transfer of power, it started writing, and I actually stopped paying attention after I read this. So it could involve a current Shadow Walker giving the power to to the initiate. It would approach the magical orb, perform a series of incantations and gestures, while the existing Shadow Walker would transfer some of their power into the orb. The new power would take the orb and consume its contents, gaining the power of the Shadow Walker. I read this, and completely different ideas popped in my head. But again, that's what inspiration is it's not always that you're gonna like watch or read something and be like, oh, I want to do that exact thing that exact same way. And especially with other people's content that's copywriting, a lot of times what happens is you read something or you watch something and different ideas pop into your head because of that inspiration. And so when I read this, I was like, okay, she goes up to the orb, the parent, the initiate's parent has died. Their power goes into the orb so that a year late it has to sit there for a while. So a year after their death, the initiate comes in, puts their hand on the orb, and then the existing Shadow Walker sparked an idea in my head for all the Shadow Walkers to gather around in a circle and kind of have their power there to support the new initiate. So I didn't even read the rest of these, right? I immediately opened up had that same Word document, and I came up with the whole entire ritual, and I wrote it. It was a very detailed process involving going into the Shadow Falls and the Shadow Realm, and then your shade comes out and your shadow form comes out and attacks you. So that really inspired me. And then I was like, okay, I need a little bit more about the villain. What does he want? So it gave me some ideas for that. And then I was like, okay, well, I can take some inspiration from some of that and figure out what he wants. So when I read, he wants an artifact, so they believe that with the artifact, they can amass an army of Shadow Walkers and conquer their enemies. Immediately, another idea hit me. The villain wants the artifact because it can actually open up the Shadow Falls and unleash the Shadow Realm, and an army of shades will come out and destroy the world. I loved it. That idea clicked with me so well, so I added that to my notes. And then, so as I was waiting, because the AI takes time to write all this down, so I was still writing the ritual idea. And I liked that afterwards they have a feast, and her culture that I've built in this is very oral. They tell stories. They're very good storytellers. So I was like, maybe you can help give me a few stories. And this was where things got complicated because I didn't know how to ask it. Give me a few fake stories to go in a fictional story. Like, I didn't know exactly how to say that. But I did clarify that they must be original. Because in another chat, I tried this before, the Fantasy Hero Stories collection chat, that one right there. And it gave me real life myths and legends like Minotaur and Centaur and like stuff like that. And I wanted original concepts. So it gave me the concept of what story I could do, but I wanted a specific tale, basically. So, the Birth of the Shadows, Great War of Light and Shadow, The Curse of the Dark Moon, Guardian of the Shadows, like all this stuff of concepts. So I was like, give me 10 more fictional stories, and I didn't want it all to do with Shadow Walkers, because again, she is a Shadow Walker, but her main people is a different culture. So it wasn't supposed to be associated with Shadow Walkers, so I had to change things up. So I was like, give me 10 more fictional stories that invent new characters. So I wanted them to have stories about people that had lived in their world, in their history, who are brave warriors inspired by Vikings, but should be original ideas. And again, I wanted to emphasize original ideas because I did that again over here, and it gave me real Viking legends and myths, and I don't want real ones. Their culture is inspired by Vikings, so they're Viking-like, combined with actually Jews, Hebrews. I don't know why, but that's their culture. So I wanted stories that were similar, and I wanted to clarify that I wanted like brave warriors and fighting and Viking style historical people for this world. And so it gave me a few ideas for that, but a lot of it was still associated with like, the Valhalla and Champion of the Gods or whatever. So it was still kind of associated with Viking legends. So I was like, okay, well, I want to see if it can write a little fake song that they sing about a hero in their culture. And so it did, and it took forever to write this thing. And I actually had to stop it. I don't know how long it would have continued, because I said short fake song, but it continued. So I don't know how good it is, but it gives kind of a start, and I feel like if you put some work and effort into this, you can tweak it to make more sense, to be a little bit more mature, like Lord of the Rings-esque. So then I was like, I still need some ideas, so I figured out to word it 5 fake historical events that are part of this warrior culture, basically. And so it gave me some historical events, and I was like, at this point, while I actually was so inspired, I think it was like way up here, I started writing in the book. I got really inspired because I'd written the ritual idea, and was writing all this stuff about the ritual and my villain, and the next scene was the ritual. So I literally started writing last night, and I ended up writing 2,000 words. And I wrote the ritual, and I wrote her becoming a Shadow Walker and that whole sequence. And I was so inspired, and so every once in a while I would pause and kind of read what the AI had said. So while I was in the middle of the ritual, I couldn't figure out what to call the orb, and I didn't want to just call it an orb or a shadow orb. So I was like, I'll just ask it really quick. I was like, give me a really good title for the magical orb used to create new Shadow Walkers, because I was so inspired, I didn't want to stop writing, but this was like, I was stuck on this title. So the Shadow Wall Stone, I was like, give me 3 more. And so it gave me 3 more, but those were too long, so I was like, give me 3 more and make them short and good. So it did this. And so I was like, core, I could work with that. Give me another word for core. It did kernel. So at that point, I just Googled synonyms. And I was like, what about heart? Soul, give me another word for soul. Essence. So I came up with something, and then I was still trying to come up with something. And so I was like, instead of talisman, amulet, instead of orb, maybe a different word like that. So it gave me those suggestions. And I was like, instead of orb, maybe some other word. So I looked up synonyms of the word orb. I did that on Google as well. And I was like, woo, what about emblem or totem? Because that was a suggestion from the Google search I did. So it gave me icon, symbol, and crest. So I liked crest. So I called it shadow crest. But I was like, maybe there's a better word for shadow. And it said umbra. And I'm like, I just want to get to writing. So I'm just going to call it the shadow crest. So I called it the shadow crest, and I kept writing. And again, in an hour, I wrote 2,000 words. So I literally vlogged, like, guys, I'm sorry, this is the last vlog. I'm not in the Shadowfall anymore. I'm leaving it unfinished. I'm done with this book. I don't know if I'm ever going to come back to it in the future or not, but at least part of it's written, and that's that. I went from that, literally giving up on the story's dead, to literally writing 2,000 words in it in an hour and having a villain, a plot, and everything else. So what I was missing was a villain and a plot. So sometimes when you're stuck with writer's block, perhaps you're missing something. It may not be a villain or a plot. Maybe you have a good villain. Maybe you have a good plot. But there may be something missing, and either you can talk and try to figure it out, reread your story, take some time to just write, pull up a Microsoft Word, pull up something, a document, and just start writing anything you can think of that's associated with your story to try to get it out of your head. That's one of the suggestions of overcoming writer's block that I've often suggested to people. And this is the exact same thing, except you're going to get suggestions thrown back at you. And it's so good. I recommend this to everybody because instead of just pulling up a Microsoft Word document and just writing down random things that you can think of, because I could have written all my suggestions here, but I wouldn't have gotten, like the concept of the villain that used to be a former Shadow Walker. That thought sparked my own ideas, and I wouldn't have gotten that without this Chat GPT. So when you're having writer's block, it's a good idea to use this AI to ask it questions like, okay, this is what I've got, this is my story, I'm stuck here, can you give me suggestions for this? And then you can ask it questions like, can you get more detailed? Can you give me 5 ideas for this thing? Can you give me 5 suggestions for this? Can you give me 3 for that? Can you give me, even like asking it, can you give me synonyms for a word? Can you give me, a fictional song for my book? And then you can take this line, tweak it, and turn it into a little poem. You can ask it for, different plot ideas, and basically using this as a source of inspiration to reignite your inspiration and motivation for your story and to help you overcome writer's block. So I hope that this video has helped you and given you encouragement if you're stuck in a story, or like with my other book, with my action thriller book, I didn't know what I was doing. So if you're working on a new genre and you don't know what you're doing, this AI chat can help not only give you tips and teach you, but give you suggestions and ideas. Or it can also help you if you do know what you're doing and it's a genre that you do write a lot. It can give you ideas and inspiration and help you overcome writer's block. So, and there's nothing wrong with using it to help give you inspiration. As I said, if you're building a house, you have to get the bricks from somewhere. This Chat GPT is the bricks. Now, once you have the bricks, these concepts, it's up to you to take them and turn them into a house, aka your story. One thing I do want to premise here is that this is not a replacement for research if you're doing something that you need real life proof or evidence or historical fiction. Like if you need, you can't replace research with this, because this AI chat does get information wrong. So that's why I'm very comfortable with talking to it about fake ideas, because everything that I talked to it about was just fictional ideas that don't need actual proof. I didn't ask it for anything with actual facts in it. So if you need, like, for instance, if your character gets shot and you need to know what happens to a character when they get shot, actually do the research. This AI chat may have wrong information, or if you use this AI chat, fact check it with real information. If you're writing historical fiction and you need to know what happened in a battle at a specific time frame, go Google it, find research, buy a book, and actually do the research, because this AI chat will have information incorrect. But if you're talking to it about fictional stuff that doesn't exist, it can't really get anything wrong, because there's nothing to get wrong. It's all fake anyway. So feel free to use it for like fictional fantasy stuff or sci-fi stuff or fake stuff, or to develop a mystery or a romance or whatever, fictional stuff. But if you need actual research for your book, like wounds or a town or city layout, population, a historical event, a battle, a historical figure, anything like that that requires actual facts and research, do the research on your own, or fact check this AI, because it will have information incorrect. I hope that this has helped you and given you another suggestion for how to overcome writer's block and how to get inspired for your story. If it has, please give it a like. Be sure to subscribe for more writing videos every Monday and writing sprints every Wednesday. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. If you want to see another video I did about AI, click here. Can AIs write better than writers? Watch the video to find out.